Tonight it's our fourth talk of this winter season, and it's my great pleasure to introduce two speakers. We have Ness Ainsworth and Dave Miller of LITA, and they're going to talk about the delights of the Lymington International Twinning Association, and hopefully we'll get a glimpse of the benefits of being part of that group. Dave, I think you're going to kick this off, so over to you.
To share the screen?
Share screen, yeah.
Okay, so, well, it's over to Ness to start with. She's the chair, so you're in charge, boss.
Good. Well, at last I can say welcome, everybody. And thank you very much for joining us on this rather momentous night, the first day of our another month lockdown. And I'm sorry to drag you away from the American elections, which I'm sure you're all glued to. I won't make a comment, but there may be a little smiley face coming up there. And I'm sorry, it's not a live presentation. We just missed it by one day, not being able to actually come and see all. So, and this is the first time I've ever done this, so do bear with me. I mean, I've done live presentations in my job. As you know, I'm Vanessa Ainsworth. I'm chairman of the Lymington and District International, we say district as well, International Twinning Association. On taking early retirement from AstraZeneca, my husband and I went over to France. Yeah, we took off in a large mobile home and finally settled in France and bought a house there. We stayed there for 11 years. And on returning to Lymington 5 years ago, I was very keen to continue the French connection, hence looking.
You've frozen, unfortunately.
Well, just let me introduce myself for a moment while we see if Vanessa comes back. I'm a retired university academic. I spent most of my career at Glasgow University, which explains my strong Scottish brogue. But I worked for 5 years in the 1970s in Germany, and also worked for a short time in Switzerland in universities. And I've retained, or my wife and I, we've retained strong contacts with Germany as a result of that. So when we retired and moved down to Lymington, which is 12 years ago now, we were very keen to join the Twinning Association and use it as not least as a vehicle for maintaining connections, in our case, with Germany, although we have good connections with all three of our twin towns, which we will get back to as we work through this presentation. I guess for most of you, if you're at all observant, you should be if you're driving, you will have noticed these signs at the entrance to the town. There are about 4 or 5 locations where these signs are up, and the one in the middle is the old sign, and its replacement is on the right of the screen. And first off, we should say that the Twinning Association, are not responsible for the lack of the E agu, the E acute, over vitre. Indeed, for the first few weeks when we came here, my wife and I, we thought the town was called Vitre because we'd only ever seen it written like that. So as you see from that sign, we are twinned with Vitre in France, with Almansa in Spain, and with Mosbach in Germany. So what's town twinning all about? Well, this essentially is our talk encapsulated, so I'll leave you to ponder that for a few minutes, and I probably don't need to say anything much more. It's actually a word cloud from one of our newsletters, but most of the words and phrases buried on there will make a little bit more sense, I hope, when we've gone through our presentation. So those are the magnificent crests, first of all, of Lymington, of course, itself, and our 3 twin towns. And we'll be saying more about our twin towns as we work through. So again, Mosbach in Germany, Vitre in France, Almansa in Spain. And Ness mentioned earlier on, our acronym is LITA, Lymington and District International Twinning Association. The and district part is important because we have any number of members from the immediate surroundings. I myself live in Everton. We have plenty of members as far away as Branscore and other places, and there's a good deal of overlap with other groups as well. So it's by no means constricted, and particularly important is to mention Milford. They've occasionally attended UDI and forming their own twinning links, but we put an end to that. So they are part of the group. The other most obvious connection some of you may have spotted that relates to our twinning links is that we have streets named in Lymington for all three of our twin towns. In the middle, the centre there at the top, Almansa Way is the most recent, and this is down by the causeway. Some of you may recognise at the Red Road development, which thankfully doesn't appear on this image, and some of you may recognise club member Andrew Sutherland there off to the right in the back row. So he is on the committee at the moment as the representative of the town council. He's on Lita's committee. The mayor of Almansa is the prominent gent at the left-hand end of the Almansa sign. So we have an Almansa Way. We have Morsbach Place, which is down quite near the community centre. And down at bottom right, we have Vitre Gardens. And again, the lack of the E acute is not our problem. That's all down to Hampshire Roads. They refuse to put any accents on their signs. And Vanessa has promised one night to sneak out and rectify that. But our twin towns reciprocate. So, for example, top left, we have Lymington Strasse over in Morsbach. And really quite recently, in the middle of the bottom, you see a photo taken at the splendid La Plaza de Lymington, which is in Almansa. And you can tell by the sunshine. So those links are made more obvious there in that reciprocal naming of streets. So what's twinning all about? Well, this is the more tedious stuff, but let's just give you some idea. I, for one, despite having, I suppose, quite significant international contact, partly through my professional life in academia, I had really little idea of what twinning was about. So you're all excused if you know very little about it either. The town twinning movement started in the 1920s and it increased considerably post-war for reasons I guess you can all imagine, and became particularly strong since the advent of the EEC initially and EU as it is now. So there are about 2,000 British town twinning links, and about 50% of those, as you see, are with France, French towns, about 25% with Germany, and otherwise the links extend, not just in Europe, it has to be said. Some towns and cities have links far more widespread. Some of you will know that Christchurch, the original Christchurch, is twinned with its namesake in New Zealand, for example. And excuse the background noise, somebody's having Guy Fawkes night out here. So partly twinning was to foster the post-war ideals that are mentioned there, and these are genuine, they're not just platitudes. So the idea of cementing peace, particularly through having better knowledge of one another's near neighbours in particular and their cultures, and the concept of people swapping with like-minded souls in other towns is an important ideal that's there. There are various versions of twinning, and they range from the very corporate, which I've mentioned here, Lincoln. I happen to know about, my father-in-law lives there, and they twinned with Neustadt an der Weinstraße in Germany, just north of the Black Forest. And there the linking is for many years, was very much at the civic level. This really was a jamboree for the officials of the towns, but it had major consequences because Lincoln is where the very first German market, Christmas market, came to Britain. They started off with 11 stalls in 1982, I think. Now this is a major event with well over 200 stalls. It takes over, under normal times, the whole of the centre of Lincoln. Is a really big deal. So that's one extreme. The other extreme, more individualistic, and an example nearby is Sway, where they have a much more linking of pairing up of individual families. They provide, the Sway people provide that linkage, and that's a very strong link. They travel individually, sometimes as a group, and so on. Has Ness reappeared?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Ness, do you want to pick up? Please do.
Okay, these are the dates when we first started twinning. First of all came Vitre, known as jumelage, followed by Almansa, which is la hermanamiento, which is la hermana, means sister. So it's a sisterhood in 1983. And then in 1996, we joined with Mosbach, the Partnerstadt. Dave's better at pronouncing that than I am.
Very
Next
good.
slide, Dave. And these are all the various charters that we signed. The dates I've already told you, and you will find these, I think I'm right in saying they're all in the town hall, unless of course they're in the other people's town hall. I think that one on the left might be in Almansa itself. I can't, yeah, I think it is. Is that right, Dave? Is that in Almansa?
Yeah, I think there'll be copies in both places, yeah, reciprocal signings and so on.
Yeah, so that's all very, very official, which is very lovely. Next slide, please. And these are our 3 towns, and we're going to talk in more detail about these later. So the more exciting bits are still to come. So Mosbach, as you know, is Germany, Almansa is in Spain, and we'll be showing you on the map where that is, and Vitré, of course, is France. So could we have the next slide, please? So who joins LITA and why do they join? Well, currently our membership's about 100. Sorry about the background. That's the waiter serving the, but there's a lack of red wine. I think quite a few of you will know John. I've had to come downstairs because I was told I was unstable upstairs. And I haven't had any wine. Yeah. So we're about 100 at the moment, which is very nice. So what are the benefits of joining and why do people join? Let's have the next slide, please, Dave. Well, one of the biggest reasons that people join is to participate in the exchange visits en famille. I mean, there's actually nothing like being in somebody else's house in another country and really understanding the culture and the philosophies of that country. And finally, when you go out with that family and you're not a tourist anymore. You're suddenly part of the fabric of that country. And, you know, for the first time, you can really get into interesting discussions with people about why they do things and how they do things. And it's been lovely during lockdown that we can still keep in touch with our families and find out, you know, what's happening in Spain and what, you know, how it affects them and how everyone in France has to go out every time they leave the house with a piece of paper and all these little details that, you know, and how, what their view is and whether they feel that they're being treated fairly and what they think of us, which we don't always want to know, but hey. Yeah, so I think next slide, please, Dave. Yeah, now the next important thing is to keep up language skills. And certainly for myself, that was a very strong reason for joining because it's you know, you can go to official language groups and you can go to classes, but there's nothing like actually getting into a group with people around a coffee or whatever and just talking. And it really does. I mean, my French actually I think has improved since I left France because we were in such an expat community that it was very much talk to the builders, talk to the cleaning lady and talk in shops, but not actually talk about things. So I found that very, very valuable. Could we have the next slide, please, Dave? So this is just a little funny on what do you do if you can't speak, you know, no problem. No, do you speak French? No problem. No, I don't speak German. No problem. If somebody comes here without any English, it's no problem. And if we go to a host family abroad and we don't speak the language, again, it never seems to be a problem. And hands and smiles seem to go a long way. But often you'll find one of each couple will speak some of the language and the rest is done with, you know, would you like another glass of wine or you know, can I offer you a little bit more quiche? So it really isn't a problem. I don't speak any German, but, and of course, I am ashamed to say so many of our European counterparts do speak such good English that it does make us quite lazy. So could we have the next slide, please? Another reason why people join is because they do love another country. I mean, yes, travel broadens the mind, but often it's because people have lived in that country or spent time in that country and they want to keep up that relationship and they are Francophiles, or I don't know what you call a Spanishophile, but I'm sure there must be a word, Españolophile or something like that. Could we have the next slide? And people feel very much part of a club when they join LITA, because it's not a huge club and because we see each other a lot. People are very supported, and if there's anything wrong or people are ill, and just to make friends, and you know, as we were saying earlier before we started this chat, to recognize people when you walk down the street, and there's always somebody you recognize, you can chat. And as we were saying earlier, there's a lot of cross clubbing in Lymington, which is lovely. And I'm talking to a lot of you who are members of other clubs that I'm a member of, and it's great. Well, I think it's lovely, personally. Could we have the next slide? And our social activities, this is something that probably people don't realise, but one of our funding routes, but really that's only a secondary reason, is that we do an awful lot of social things. Sadly, this year we haven't. We've had to cancel virtually everything. But we have Skittles matches, and we have a Christmas dinner, we have a summer party, we have quiz nights, we have wine tasting. Oh, as we speak, I just test this, see if there's a nose. Does it come from? Oh yes. Oh, it's a Rioja. So yeah, we have wine. We have all sorts of things. Probably 5 or 6 a year, which is quite a lot actually for a small club, and that's run by our social committee. I was trying to click, but of course Dave's doing the clicking. Could we have the next slide? Thank you. The conversation groups, I think, are quite unique, really, here in the forest, and some of the other twinning groups do like to join us in that. These are all very, very informal groups, but structured, and they run each of them. I think if we look at the next slide, Dave, we'll see the picture of the different ones. The tertulia, I didn't even know what tertulia meant. It's actually originates from little groups of Spanish men who would gather in bars and talk about who was going to win the next bullfight. And I think women were strictly banned, but the wider world now allows women, I believe, to join these tertulias. Stamich, I think, and Dave would probably correct me if it means a regular table of a discussion table. Is that right, Dave?
Yes, correct. Perfect.
We don't actually have a name. Could we have the next slide? We don't actually have a name for the French breakfast other than French breakfast. And we meet at the Blaireau, which is, what's the name of the hotel? I've forgotten the name of the hotel.
In Brockenhurst, yeah.
In Brockenhurst, beginning with a C. Yeah, anyway, you know the one. It'll come to me in a minute. And they have a very sort of French flavour, and the room you can see in the middle there has got this French painting background and everything. And we meet there for Café Croissant et Cosette at the Blaireau Bistro. Carey's Manor, that's it. Oh, yeah. It's at Carey's Manor in Brockenhurst, and that's very well supported. And all those groups, I'm not sure about the German group because I'm not part of it, but certainly the other two are still running online, which is brilliant. What about the German, Dave? Is that still running?
No, we've fitfully had a couple of goes, but for various reasons it hasn't been doing it regularly. Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm sure you can do something about that.
We'll try.
Shall we have a look at the next slide? Now, fundraising. There are very, very common misconceptions about how much the town hall is involved. And I must say, I was very guilty when I first came here of thinking that twinning was all about town hall jollies. And it couldn't be further from the truth. We actually have to really encourage the town hall to become involved at all with us. So the way we're actually funded is in 4 different ways. Our membership fees, which are £25 for a couple, or less if you're a single person. Through our social events, we do have a grant from the town council, which was more generous this year. because we were planning to put on a big jamboree for our French friends to celebrate the 40 years of their twinning. But of course that didn't happen. So we've still got that money ready in the bank. And we also put a levy on anyone who travels. So for example, if you went over to France, we would levy, I don't know, £35 or something like that, which we then bank to entertain the French people when they come back to us. So that seems to work very well. I think that's probably all I can say about fundraising. Yes, thank you. For our, oh, hang on, we're whizzing too fast there. Back you go, Dave. Back. That was it. That's it, that one. Yeah, for our twin towns, their funding is very, very different. They are hugely supported by their town halls, and all the activities that we have are funded by their town halls, and we always have a lot of town hall presence at various functions. However, that model is changing as well due to different EU, I don't know if they're laws, but they're certainly regulations that they're bringing in. So I think in future they will have to follow a model more like ours, where it becomes more self-sufficient. But that's all still to come. I mean, at the moment we can't see each other at all, so that's by the by. Right, could we have the next slide? Right, now we're going to actually talk about our three towns, Vitré, Almansa and Mosbach. So first of all, that is the map of France, as you would recognize, superimposed on the French flag. And the next slide, please. Where is Vitré? Now you can see it in detail. You can see how much it is part of Brittany. And if you were to ask someone who lives in Vitré, where do you live? They would say they live in Brittany. And maybe they might add that they live in France as well. The flag that you see there in the top right is the flag of Brittany, and it very closely resembles the Cornish flag. And those of you who are sailors know that you raise is it the pennant? You raise the pennant of the place that you're sailing into, and probably those of you who sail will have sailed into Cornwall and have to raise the Cornish flag. And this is the same with the Vitré flag. So now you know what to raise. And you can see where it is in relation to Saint-Malo. And it's probably the nearest place is Saint-Malo if you were going across by boat. So could we have the next slide and we'll have a little look. Yeah, now a lot of towns in Europe have a lot more twinning involvement than we do. And Vitré has 8 other towns that they have to cope with, both in Canada, Spain, USA, England, Poland, Little Mali, Germany and Romania. And this is quite a nightmare for the town hall to organise all the exchanges. It's bad enough for us with 3, but for them to have to work out 8 must be actually a nightmare. And you can see why they need some town hall involvement to do this. They actually do need some almost full-time staff. Could we have the next slide? And this is how to get to Vitré. You can go by coach over on the ferry to, from many of our ports over to Portsmouth, to Caen, Cherbourg or Saint-Malo. Or sometimes we fly to Rennes. Well, we did when Southampton was operating. That route is close to us at the moment. But there are other ways, aren't there, Dave? If we could have the next slide. There. Now, you may recognise John and Sheila Ward. They didn't cycle all the way because they did take the ferry. But apart from that, they actually did cycle all the way there on their, I don't know what you call it. It's not really a tandem. It's looks more like a bed to me. Could we have the next slide? Yeah. And of course, you can sail there. So the way to sail is round Stormy Brest, towards Saint-Nazaire, and then you'd come into Roche-Bernard, and then you can make your way up the river and up the Vilaine. The trouble is you're going to need a smaller boat, so you need to dump your sailing boat, get into something else. By the time you get to Vitré, I think you're going to be on a paddleboard. I don't think it would be very easy to get, but certainly some of our folk do sail to and leave the boat at Roche Bernard. I don't know how they then get there. Maybe they get their hosts to pick them up, which people are always very, very willing to do. So that's something for you sailors. And could we have the next slide? And this is what I think is so wonderful. The minute you sail into St. Malo and you see those beautiful walls and the old town, you're abroad. I mean, you've been on a boat for a few hours and suddenly you're on holiday, you're abroad. It's so different. It's so French. And you just shake off all your cares and you know you're going to get a very, very warm welcome from your host. So it is just the most wonderful feeling. So let's have a look at the next slide. And these are some lovely, lovely pictures of Vitré that Dave's put together. The one on the top left is the chateau, very, very old chateau. The old streets, I mean, it is a very, very old town. And it seems to be pretty unscathed as well, as Mosbach is as well. It was spared, I think, in the war. And there's a pretty little, funny little narrow street there, and a little house that gets narrower and narrower as it goes towards the bottom. And could we have a look at the next slide? And that's the chateau that I previously mentioned, which dates back to the 10th century. And it has the most immense courtyard where they do an awful lot of putting things on, putting shows on. When we've been there, we've had big, not demonstrations. What's another word for demonstration? Where they put on singing and dancing and speeches and all of that sort of thing. And dancing of all the different, Breton costumes and things like that. Very impressive. And also the mayor's office is there as well. What a lovely place to have an office. And the next slide, please. And these are just more lovely, lovely pictures. In the middle there's a very strange little picture of someone in a funny little hat. I don't know, Dave, whether that means anything to you.
It's just what, yeah, these are my photos. It's just the end of one of the supporting beams on one of these very old, lovely half-timbered houses. Yeah.
Okay, it's not showing the house of ill repute or anything like that.
Oh, I never checked. No.
Oh, right, it could be, because we used to have those
I was in Mrs. Teapot next door,
yeah. That's for afterwards. So could we have the next slide? Thank you.
Okay.
And I don't know what it sounds like, salt. And this is the little market. Well, it's a big market, actually, in the middle of Vitré on another lovely day. And of course, we are really royally treated when we go there, and they take us on wonderful excursions. This particular group of pictures is the excursion up the River Rance to Dinan, which is always thoroughly enjoyed. And of course, you don't have to walk a lot on those sort of excursions. There, the Mont Saint-Michel, of course, is always a favourite. That is quite a day out. There's quite a lot of climbing, but by the time you get to the top, you really know you've done it. But by gum, it's worth it. And even if you have to walk, as happened one year, I think everyone was warned to wear something that didn't matter for their feet, because it must have been pretty damp. So that looks rather fun. And then this is one that really loves the war always loved by the war historians, the U-boat pens in Saint-Nazaire. I wasn't there for that trip, but Dave was, and I think it must have been absolutely fascinating. Gruesome, that's not quite the right word, but it makes you think. And that's a very, very shiny U-boat, and that's going into, it looks as though it's actually going into the engine.
Yep, correct.
Which, yes, looks quite fun. Now, this is much more to my taste. This was looking at the oyster beds at Cancale, and after we'd looked at them and admired them and talked about them, we then were treated to a little plate of oysters with some wine to wash it down, and they were so good. And I've never enjoyed oysters before, but I'm a complete convert. They are absolutely wonderful. So I just go back just for that. And the next slide, please, Dave. Now this, we had very much at the last minute. Vitre were hosting all of their twin towns in a great big jamboree because they were celebrating the 40th year of their twinning with Germany. And so they invited all their twin towns to come along at the market and have a stall and show off their towns. So we had to sort of quickly scrabble together things that we thought represented Great Britain, represented Lymington, and oh, it was so hot. It was about 39 degrees. We were all melting, but it really went down very, very well. So no, we were pleased. It was a mighty effort. And so could we have the next slide? Yeah, this is showing what it's like when you're actually with a family and sitting in their garden, having lunch, having drinks. Obviously, this is someone I don't know who's preparing the creme brulee for his guests, and other people sitting around the dinner table. And that's just so typical. We've got so many photos of the hospitality that we receive when we go there. It's wonderful. And the next slide, please, Dave. And again, meeting all the family, meeting all the little ones, finding out about them, seeing how they grow, hearing them trying out their English, which they're learning at school, and of course helping them do their headstands. So that's cute. And then we say au revoir until the next visit, which we hope will be in May next year. So fingers crossed that COVID dies a death. I hope it will. And at this point, I'm going to hand you back to Dave because he's now going to talk about Spain.
Okay, so yes, off to Almansa. And through these slides, I hope you get the impression we're trying to give you an idea of the sort of feel that we get when we're making these trips. So it is a combination of being with the families that we're with, but there's always one day given over to a major outing of one sort or another. And virtually every time there's also a large communal get-together, a large evening meal at each of our locations. And we reciprocate, of course, but that's just to give you a flavour. So there's Almansa, as you see, in southeastern Spain. That's a close-up. So it's about 60 miles inland from Valencia, as I'm learning to call it. Valencia, very beautiful. And Alicante, we generally fly into Alicante and then we're picked up from there. As with each of our trips, a number of us might travel independently and then join the group, but it's always the case with us that we travel as a large group. So I don't know if Ness mentioned the numbers. I don't think so. But
no,
so Vitre, typically we will have this, the biggest one. Obviously, most people have some sort of French go on, and so in the 50s or more. Travel to France, something over 30, usually something of that order, 25, 30 go to Germany, and the smallest of the groups is the group that go to Almansa, and that tends to be low 20s. So those sort of scale. So that's the location, and these are a couple of now old photos of the reception of the town hall, the Ayuntamiento. We have always have quite a significant town hall reception in each of our twin towns. As far as possible, something modest is reciprocated at our end. That's not to denigrate what happens at Lymington. It's just the fundamentally different nature of the setup of the relationship of the town hall to its immediate community. That's much stronger for each of our twin towns, and indeed it's typical of France, Germany and Spain. And Britain and England is unusual in that respect. For those of you with an eagle eye, actually hadn't really spotted, well, I knew it was there, but I'll remark on it. The huge mural in the background is of the Battle of Almansa, which literally and metaphorically has put it on the map. It was the largest single battle in the War of the Spanish Succession. I did 1485 to 1701, so I didn't cover this, but some in my school years, some of you may know more about the War of Spanish Succession. One of the beauties of this particular battle, it was literally the most important battle in that entire campaign. And the British army was led by a French general, and the French army was led by a British general. That's believed to be historically unique. The Spanish reenact this every couple of years, I think, so it's quite a big deal for them. So this gives you an impression of what Almansa looks like. Beautiful small town. Incidentally, all three of our twin towns are roughly the same size as us in terms of population. They're all around the 20,000 mark. So this beautiful castle sits in the middle of town. There's a rocky promontory. It's a very important literal and metaphorical crossroads within that part of Spain. And so a very important strategic location. The town's name is a Moorish or Arabic name, as you can gather, Almansa. And it was occupied and fortified. This medieval fort was raised first by the Moors and was occupied for a few hundred years of that the Arabs held this part of Spain. And then they were tipped out, of course, in the late medieval period, and the later fortifications are from the Christian reintroduction. But it's a wonderful location. Few photos to give you a feel for Almansa. Never anybody about, of course, a couple of cats. That's all you ever see in daytime. True of many Spanish towns, sleepy, but absolutely gorgeous. We're very lucky in all three of our twin towns there. They're all each very lovely places. No matter when we make our trips to Almansa, it's going to be on a weekend with a festival of some sort that seems to occupy almost every weekend of the year, as far as one can tell. So this is one of the older ones, older in terms, I wasn't on this trip, but this was some years ago, this particular trip, the Virgin of Bethlehem, one of the Almansa fiestas, just a short way outside town. One of those things where the whole town takes part. This one I have seen is absolutely fantastic. This part of southern Spain has several towns that celebrate on a massive scale the freedom of the removal of the Moors by the Christians. And so the Moros y Cristianos, traditional costumes, literally hundreds of people involved, whole series of clubs in the town, which each has an identity in the parade. So they have a traditional set of costumes. They fulfill certain roles. There are the wonderful continental style brass bands, always playing slightly off tune in that endearing way that they do. This bashes on, in this case, at least for the whole of the day. You get an impression of what these parades are like. I filled my camera memory cards with hundreds of photographs the first time I saw this absolutely stunning level of production, almost unknown. I think most of you wouldn't be aware that this existed. It's an absolutely major event in, as I say, half a dozen or so towns in this part of Spain. Really spectacular. And it finishes in Almansa with this reenactment of the Christians storming the castle. And there are horses, and there were a couple of camels there on the occasion I saw it. Hundreds of people involved. You have to slog through to about 1 in the morning to get to this part. You've already been there since about 8 in the evening. It's a very long and fantastic do. But just a typical weekend in Almansa. Mm-hmm. They also do a bit of this, of course. And yes, there are some very good wines available in that immediate area. There are some of the names there might mean something to some of you aficionados of wine from that part of the world. And again, it's about friends and family. We link closely with people. It's sort of at random when you form the initial contact, and most of us have contacts with families that we've then become very strongly connected to. It's worth saying that if ever it works out that it's not quite the right person for you to have twinned up with, then the committee can, in a very discreet way, can make sure that you get moved across to somebody different next time. And it's possible to disconnect and then reconnect without any problem. But it's very much the way the thing works. So that's hasta la vista. So goodbye from Almansa. We get our photo, pile in the bus, back off to the airport, and the trip's over. So now a quick dash through Germany. Molsbach, as you see, is down right in the center of Europe. All three of our twin towns landlocked, which means that it's a gift when they come to us. They just adore that we are on the coast, which anybody does from anywhere. It's beautiful by any measure. But of course, for three landlocked towns, it's especially attractive. So Molsbach lies on the river Neckar, which is shown on the map there. It's a very large tributary to the Rhine. And as you can see, just to the west of Mosbach is Heidelberg. That's the nearest town that many of you perhaps will have heard of, and then Mannheim, which lies on the Rhine itself, where the Neckar joins. A couple of 100 miles long, very substantial waterway. Mosbach is on the so-called Burgenstrasse, the castle road or castle way, which begins in Mannheim there on the map and goes nearly 600 miles all the way to Prague. And there are something like 60 castles, these fantastic Germanic castles dotted along this route at irregular intervals. And Mosbach is one of the towns that sits on the Burgenstrasse, the Castle Way, which is a very nice tourist route. So this is 1996, the signing at the Mosbach end of the twinning link. And there's Sheila Ward, some of you may recognize. So she's still very prominent in Leiter, of course. At that time, she was chair with Mayor Bennett, as it was then. And I put a picture there of Uli Welke. The reason we are twinned with Mosbach is that Uli Welke was a Mosbach, born and raised, and he came over to Britain in the late 60s, I think, early 70s, and the retail trade. And one way and another, he met up with Jenny Elliott, and they cemented their relationship, married. So Uli and Jenny Welke ran until together with other members of the family, Elliott's in the High Street. So Uli was a very prominent citizen here in Lymington, and it's he who, on his initiative that we twinned with Mosbach. A great motorcycle fan, incidentally, if you didn't know. Kept his German motorbike here, his BMW, and kept his British motorbike, a Triumph, over in Mosbach. So this is one of a series of views around Mosbach, give you an idea of what the place is like. You can see the lovely wooded hills in the background. This is Mosbach is in part of the Odenwald, as it's called, lovely, quite a different forest from the Black Forest, the Schwarzwald. This is the Odenwald, lovely hilly wooded area that runs a long way east from starting somewhere near Mosbach. You see we've got half-timbered houses, very reminiscent of Vitre, and again a lovely old town centre. We often get a guided tour for those that haven't been before. This is a lovely old Rathaus, the town hall, 15th century, and that's a group of the Mosbachers being entertained there. A few shots around the town. Big market square again, as in Vitre, and a regular weekly market there. And again, as in Vitre, as Ness was saying, in the town, the town hall in that case, they have many sorts of activities, displays, one thing and another, events take place in this very fine town hall, town square. So this is one of the little things one needs to see in Mosbach. This is the so-called Kivelschisse, and the Kivel part of that's
John, you couldn't log off.
Corruption of the word Kussel, which is like the word for a tub. And Mosbach for years was heavily involved in the leather trade and shoemaking, which incidentally also figures in Almansa, still does. Almansa is still quite significant high-end shoemaking, and it was for a while in older times in Vitre as well, purely coincidental. But the other part of that word, Kivelschisse, is the word you probably could understand, and it relates to the contents of said barrel in olden times. Certain human byproducts were put in there as part of the treatment process for leather. And this is just to give you a tiny idea of, this is a short walk, literally very close to the town centre in the main photo, and one of the many castles very nearby to Mosbach, of which there are any number, as I mentioned, down this Burgenstrasse. That particular castle lies looking over the river Neckar, and we often see it in and out of our trips. Again, ideas of the excursions we have from each of our twin towns. This is an outing to Heidelberg on the Neckar. Very beautiful old city, famous for its university, of course. We had one visit, we went to this, the Schnuckerloch, which is there are several traditional student pubs there. And the little quip I put at the bottom, no fencing allowed. Heidelberg is one of the ancient universities where I can see Clive gesticulating it there, where the fencing takes place, quite right too. And it used to be, and amazingly enough still is the case, that the macho males try to get themselves cheek scars to impress the ladies. That used to be a big deal in a certain stratum of German society, but now it's a bit of an affectation, but it does still exist. Anyway, wonderful old town. Slightly different kind of excursion. From a couple of years ago, we went to Bad Friedrichshall, which is a salt mine. And we are talking a serious salt mine here. The middle picture at the top shows you the bags of salt still being produced. This is rock salt. So top left, that photo, that is a group of the Twinners. We are in the salt mine. To get there, we had to have a 200-foot drop down in the miner's cage. Quite exciting, not for the faint-hearted. And then we wandered around in these enormous chambers and tunnels. So the bottom right photograph there, that's one of the original mining tunnels there. Now this is dedicated as a museum section. These absolutely massive works going on underneath. A fantastic place. It's typical of the kind of excursions we get in each of our twin towns. You go to places that they're often fantastically impressive, but mostly they're off the usual tourist trail, and that's a fascination. You know, you really do feel as though you're one of the locals. Picture at the bottom shows most of the group attempting to break out of the salt mine, and we were allowed out for good behaviour. Complete difference. On our last trip there, we had an excursion to what is an extremely rare equine dairy. There are a handful of these in Germany, one or two other places in Europe. So that is a rare shot of a mare being milked. It's quite a large, I think they had, what was it, Ness, about 100 horses, something of that order? It was a big number of horses there. And in fact, the stock there is strengthened a little bit by some New Forest ponies, which they've introduced. That's coincidental to the fact we were visiting. But to improve the bloodstock, they've actually got some New Forest ponies involved in the breeding program. And we had a lovely excursion on these beautiful covered wagons. There were 3 of these things drawn by horses through the nearby woods and so on. So it's an example of an unusual excursion.
Very.
And then, somebody speaking? Okay.
With me.
Okay, it's Ness. Good. So this is, again, we had a beautiful meal at the castle in the background there. That's Burg Gutenberg, that's the one, and where the Duke was present himself and entertained us with his perfect English at the meal. So auf Wiedersehen to Mosbach, and now we're back home. So over to you, Ness.
So just to wrap up, what happens when our visitors come here? Well, obviously the bar is set quite high. But I don't mean that sort of bar, I mean the other sort of bar. We normally have some sort of civic welcome. We try and involve a mayor or deputy who's got chains on because it looks impressive. Sometimes that's right at the beginning when they arrive on the coach, and the mayor might say a few words, and then everyone thankfully goes home with their friends. We reciprocate with outings. We've taken them to places like, well, it gets harder and harder as the years go by, in fact. We've been as far as Arundel, I think even London, Oxford, Durlston, Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, all sorts of places like that. Then there's always a family day so that people can either rest or just stay with the family chatting, depends how well they know them, or be taken out to somewhere more local. Often you'll see people in the market on market day. You know, our family like to go to the market, and you'll always meet other groups there who are doing exactly the same thing. Sometimes you'll find there's a little fete on, like at Pilewell or something, and that makes a nice, and a real typical English fete is always a nice thing to do. And of course, we always have the big communal evening meal with entertainment. It could be singing, dancing, or both. We do struggle to find big enough venues, particularly, well, when the Germans come as well, but with the French, they try and squeeze in as many as we can take. They have to limit their number to 50 something. I mean, they try and squeeze in 60 plus. We can't cope with that because We, of course, the hosts go with. So, to try and find a venue for 120 people is really pushing it. But we manage, we find places with difficulty. And then if we could have the next slide, please, Dave. We do have links with other twinned organisations, which is very useful. There's an organisation called the New Forest Twinners, and we learn from each other. We check on who's done what, who we use, what bands did we use, what caterers did we use, where did we take them, all of that sort of thing, and how to get new recruits. And the community centre and St Barb have all the information about us, so you can always pick up leaflets there. And they've even got information in other languages for our visitors to pick up, which is rather good. Could we have the next slide, please, Dave? These are the New Forest Twinners, because some of you will come from some of these villages and recognise the names that are probably on your panels as you go into your towns. And Ringwood seem to be, they are quite busy. They always seem to come up with lots of different ideas. They're a useful one. Brockenhurst often join with us for various things, and as do Hordle. And you might be wondering how we organise ourselves, our LITA. We are formally constituted. You've seen all those different charters that we have, and we also have a constitution of our own. We have an annual general meeting. We have officially appointed officers. We are a non-profit organisation. Our officers comprise the honorary president, who is always the mayor, the chairman, secretary, treasurer, the vice chairs for the 3 twin towns, one at least of whom is watching tonight, the social committee, who put on all these wonderful events, the publicity editor, who of course is Dave, and the Lymington Town Council representative, who at the moment is Andrew Sutherland. And without that committee, well, I wouldn't be able to do my job. They just do the most amazing job, and I always have to put my hands up and thank them, because I couldn't do it. Well, I wouldn't do anything on my own. So could we have the next slide, please? So there we are. There is the word cloud, and hopefully we've unravelled a little bit of this so that you know a bit more about us. And if you want to pick up a leaflet in any of those places I've mentioned, or go onto the website, go onto Lymington twinning.weebly. I can't see the rest because I've hidden it with pictures, or just tap in Lymington Twinning and you'll find us. And we'd be really, really happy if some of you would like to join us, because we're always looking for new members. And I don't know if Dave mentioned earlier, because that's when I got lost, that we do struggle to get younger members. A lot of our members started young and grew up with the families, but they're not as young as they were maybe 15 years ago or whatever. But we're not replacing them with new families, because times have changed. Families do different things. Schools don't do the exchanges anymore. I could go on forever about that, but basically we always welcome new members. So thank you very, very much for listening, everybody. And I hope it hasn't been too broken. I'm sorry about my narrow bandwidth, but I will be doing something about it. Thank you very much. I'll pass you back to Steve.
Okay, Ness, thank you very much. And Dave, thank you very much. Now, there's an opportunity, if anyone's got any questions or comments about what you've seen and heard tonight, there's a facility on your participants bar to raise your hand, but we'll also, if you wave at the camera, we'll try and pick you up that way as well. So I've got a quick question before we get into that, and that was how many members are there in Lymington that belong to LITA? You may have told me, but
yes, 100 odd.
100, okay, right, so it's quite a decent size.
Yeah.
As I was mentioning, some of them come from outside Lymington, to various degrees of outside, but yeah, so the majority are Lymingtonians of one sort or another. Yeah, very close by. Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. And Clive.
So we learned how we linked up with Mossback. How did we link up with Vitra and Almansa? Any stories for those two?
Well, we believe, Dave and I were talking about this, we believe that the Vitra link came through one of the choirs. and Michael Goldthorpe, I think, was the choir master. And but we're not absolutely sure. We were just discussing that between us. But we think that's how that was suggested, that we should link up. But I think that the choir, and I think that Shirley, I think she would know more about that, because she's.
I think that's right, Ness. That,
is that right?
I think there was a choir exchange that happened to be with Vitre, and that still continues, but it's separate from, has no explicit connection to Lita, but there's some personal relationships were established, and that's kicked it off.
Yeah, and Tim Jones presumably went to Almansa with his Spanish wife, and that's how that came about.
So that's an expat who is in Almansa.
Yeah. We need an Italian connection now.
Thank you for that. I've got a question.
Teasing there, because the possibility of an Italian connection gets raised all the time. And those of us that are a little longer in the tooth on the committee think, for goodness sake, we're busy enough as it is. And that was one of the driving threats from the Milford UDI. They were threatening to form an Italian link, but we sank that boat.
Yes.
Okay, I've got a question from Sue's iPad. So
can you hear me? It's Andrew.
Oh, it's Andrew. Hello.
Hi there, Steve.
Hi, Andrew. Hi there.
Hi, Ness.
Hi, Sue.
Dave, thank you very much for an excellent presentation. I've learned a lot more about the Lita than I ever have as your town council representative on it. It's always been great fun. A couple of points. First of all, you asked what someone was who enjoyed Spain. And I can show you, it's after having Googled it, it's an Iberophile.
Oh, excellent.
As opposed to a Francophile. We all learn useful things. And if
Iberophile.
Iberophile. And someone who enjoys being German apparently is a Teutophile or a Germanophile.
Oh, right.
So there we are. Totally useless information, but you might like
but
to
useful,
know that.
yes. Useful having you Googling.
Yeah, and what I really wanted to say was that I thoroughly enjoyed being a member of LITA, in the sense that I'm the town council representative, because we did host a delightful couple from Vitre, and then we went over to stay with them. And since then, with our boat in France, on the west coast of Brittany, we have been in touch with them on a regular basis.
Brilliant.
And only last summer, when we were out there, they very kindly came to join us in Pornic and put us up for the night. So, I mean, we are very anxious to maintain that contact with them. And they're a lovely couple, Ghislaine and Philippe. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. And I also want to say thank you much again for a very good presentation.
Well, lovely to see you, Andrew.
Yes, good to see you there.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, are there any other questions? Anyone? No, right, Judy, right?
Yes, hello. Yes, hello,
Judy.
Hi, Vanessa. You might not know, but I'm on the board of the community centre now, have been for 5 years, and we've just done this amazing development extension on the back of the now called Gates Hall, and we can now got a total kitchen and can cook and accommodate 150 people.
Oh, wow. Excellent.
Yeah.
Is that the old Fuller McClellan, or?
Yes, yes. And Daphne Fuller was a member of the Royal Lymington. I used to play bridge with her. She was
brilliant.
a wonderful person. In the 1970s, I played bridge with her. And then Grace McClellan, they both died, and they both said, we want our bequest to be for a development of something for the community centre.
How wonderful.
So it was built as a sort of kind of twin rooms that could be either one great big room or two different rooms.
Yes.
Fuller Hall. And now Mr. Gates, a local philanthropist who's retired to Lymington and has adopted us as his local project to join in with the community.
Wow.
Gave us £100,000 and wanted a room named after him. So we've now got the Fuller room, the McClellan room, and it's called the Gates Hall.
How wonderful, Judy.
It is absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant.
So
Brilliant.
we can now have really large weddings.
Yes.
Should we ever get out of this blessed thing?
We will. We will.
We will. But
we will.
Also, I mean, we can accommodate 150 people and feed them.
And
Very
feed
good.
them. Fantastic. Oh, that is really worth knowing. Thank you.
We have
Okay.
used the hall for a number of events associated with LITA, but just sort of daytime occasions and so on. And so, yeah, it's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, wonderful.
Welcome.
Brilliant, Judy.
Okay, I believe we have a question from Richard Wilstead.
Leslie.
Oh, it's Leslie. Hello.
Hello, my dear.
Hello, my darling.
I just wanted to mention the tree, the mossback tree.
Oh, of course.
And
Yes.
I was wondering if anybody on the day out when you were allowed to go out and exercise, if you felt like walking through Grove Park, you will see a tree with a little plaque, which is the mossback tree. And that commemoration event that we had, we planted a tree on behalf of Mosback, and in Mosback they planted a rather large tree. It's like embarrassing as we put the twig in, and they put half an oak in to commemorate Lymington.
Leslie, when you say they plant, you were shoveling there, weren't you, in Mosbach?
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Good
So I have photos to prove it. I could have shown that. Yeah.
And how is our tree now, Leslie? Have you seen it recently?
It's absolutely wonderful. It's got a few it has leaves on it, and we have great hopes.
Oh, good. I must go and see it
The
too.
park department, after the first tree died,
Yes.
which is very embarrassing. When Mossback came, we wondered about hanging plastic berries on it or something. But the parks department did us proud, and they put a new tree in, and that's doing quite well.
Oh, good.
And the
good.
plaque is still there.
Oh, good.
Well,
That'll be
they
vandalised.
cemented it in so that nobody could, how should I say, borrow it.
Brilliant. Oh,
Okay, excellent. Oh, I've got Andrew, I think, with another question. Let's.
For those of you who don't realise it, that we have through a connection, a living connection with these three towns, in that we have Vitre Gardens at the bottom of Belmore Lane, opposite Woodside Park. We have Almanza Way, which is the old chicken farm on the other side of the railway line. And I think, if I remember rightly, Mossback Gardens on the other library.
Mossback
So we are
Place.
keeping a
that was
connection.
covered earlier in the
missed the
talk,
beginning of the
Andrew.
talk.
I do apologise.
No,
I
no
was
problem.
obviously asleep. I missed that
Yeah.
one.
No,
It
you
was
were.
a very comprehensive review of the places. But thank you for
Did you,
reading.
Leslie talked about a tree. Did you also mention the tree that was planted in Almanza Way?
Yes, we've seen a photo. Oh no, we didn't. I didn't show the photo. So for those of you that were not otherwise detained right at the beginning, just to the left of where the street sign is that was in my photograph, there was a tree planting done just there. So if you venture just the first 20 yards into Almansa Way, on your left is the tree that was planted by the Almansa Mayor and by our fraternity. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. We've got no trees from Mossback, I take it then.
Yes,
Oh, we have. Where's that one?
that's in Grove Place. Yeah.
That's the one we were
Oh.
talking about.
Yeah, we were just talking
Oh.
about. Yeah.
Sorry, I'll go back to sleep.
Thank you,
Go back,
Andrew.
go back to the election. How are they doing?
Right. Well, look. I don't know if there's any final questions, but if not, I would like to thank Ness and Dave for giving us an insight into the delights of twinning and the benefits of being a member of LITA. It's been very inspiring and certainly something to look forward to. So I'm going to unmute everybody now, and if you'd like to show your appreciation, bear with me a second. I'm not quite there yet, but there we are. Everyone's unmuted.
Wow.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very, very good.
Thank you. Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
It is. Thanks for being
Thank you,
here.
Vanessa. Yes.
Bye, everybody.